Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day, and thank you to the 30 odd people who joined us. I have this habit of frequently introspecting the speeches I've given, and I try to deliver a part of them in a different way than it originally. Almost all the times, the variation would hinge on me trying to do something with enunciation and intonation. So, when I first heard of this vocal variety workshop by Declan, I immediately got excited and I look forward to attending it. To give you all a bit more detail on Declan, an engineer by profession, Declan has lived in Europe, US, and Asia over his career in technology. He joined Toastmasters a little over 6 years ago and currently holds the positions of area director, club coach, club mentor, and officer roles in 2 of his 4-member clubs. He's participated in contests, including the table topics in the recent years. He's getting not 1, but 2 distinguished Toastmaster awards this July. He believes that Toastmaster provides the opportunity to acquire skills that are applicable to all careers, and that Toastmasters offers a safe environment to practice new communication and leadership ideas. So me and all the people who joined us today are really looking forward to this great session on learning over vocal variety. Thank you, Declan, for taking your time out and conducting this workshop. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Akash, for those kind words. And thanks to everybody for giving up some of your valuable time on a Friday afternoon to listen to this session. As Akash said, I joined Toastmasters 6 years ago. My home club was and still is Saratoga Toastmasters. And as all enthusiastic Toastmasters will do, I immediately signed up for my icebreaker speech. I prepared for it and I delivered it, and I talked about my early life in Ireland, my educational path that revealed and disclosed an interest in the sciences and mathematics and physics, my desire after high school to go to engineering school and study electrical engineering, which brought me into the technology workplace in Ireland, and worked with a number of companies, including Apple, and then relocated to the US, where I've been for the last 25 years. My mentor, a wonderful woman at the time, said, "Declan, the content was amazing. I loved hearing about your early life in Ireland and all those influences and desires around your education to transform your life and your progress in engineering and your career. But," she said, "I have to tell you, you delivered that speech in a monotone voice. And I would suggest, Declan, that you have elevated monotone speaking to an art form. You were totally boring," she said. And she said, "I couldn't wait for the 4 to 6 minutes of this speech to be over to check if you had a pulse." Well, perhaps I've exaggerated a little bit for effect there, but that was essentially the message. And it embarked me upon a journey to discover, what is this thing called nonverbal communication? And why does Toastmasters say that sometimes 50, 60, even 70% of the effectiveness of communication is delivered through nonverbal techniques? Vocal variety being the primary one. Of course, body movement, hand gestures, etc. And I was amazed with what I discovered. And as I tend to do, I got into the detail, I studied it, and I applied the science approach to it. And the result of that is what I'm going to show you today. Now, I will say that if I look back over what has changed in my speaking abilities in the last 6 years, I can tell you sincerely, what has changed the most is vocal variety and the way I use that. It has been the single biggest change that I've made, that I've incorporated into my everyday life. my children, my adult children say, what happened to you? Because you're so different than you used to be. I've taken this very seriously. So, may I check? Abhijit, can you see the screen?
I can see the screen.
Great. And here's the agenda today, and I want to acknowledge that mentor, Jean Gobelet, a 25-year-plus veteran. Has been an enormous influence, and she still is. She's my mentor today after 6 years. And a lot of the structure of this and the content comes from my discussions with her and some work she did. So what I want to cover today is go through with you the what, the why, the how of vocal variety. I've talked a little bit about why it's important, and I want to describe what I see as the vocal variety elements. Now, I know when you talk to purists, they'll say there are more than these 4 elements that I'm reflecting here: volume, pitch, rate, and tone. They'll tell you you should talk about timbre, you should talk about cadence, you should talk about inflection, and all of those things. But I am a simple person, and this gives me 85 to 90% of the value, and I want to keep it simple because that's the way I think I learn, and I think it can be helpful if I do that. I'll show you how vocal variety, these techniques are going to be applied, and I'm going to try and do that just by demonstrating it, because that's the best way to do it and the only way I can come up with. And I want to highlight to you right now that breaking down vocal variety into these 4 elements is somewhat artificial, because in reality they all come together one way or another, and it's in their combination and integration the true effectiveness of vocal variety is delivered in a speech, in my opinion. But I want to go through this analytical approach, talk about them individually, and then we'll say, how do you put them together? In the information that Abhijit so generously sent out, I asked that you look at a video. It's a video from Ramona Smith's world-winning speech, world speech title, a world contest speech in 2018. And this person, this woman, Ramona, demonstrates vocal variety like I've never seen it. Every single sentence that she speaks, every single word has vocal variety embedded. It's a world class. Hopefully you've had, it's a world class example. Hopefully you've had time to review it, and we'll review that here later on in this session. And I want to invite a group discussion from you around where you're seeing these elements. And the idea is to have you analyze the speech for these elements, and perhaps that might help get the concepts across effectively to you. People always ask me, well, okay, vocal variety is one thing in Toastmasters, but how do we apply that in the real life? Declan, you don't talk like this in business meetings. Well, I've got an answer for you there, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A. So that's our plan. Okay, so let's get started. The elements of vocal variety are these 4 elements, and I want to talk about them a little bit and very briefly. And as I say, I'm going to try and demonstrate what it means to me, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. So the first one is volume, and the element of volume are speak loudly or speak softly. And in my opinion, you use volume, you use loudness for emphasis, for forcefulness. You use sincerity when you're speaking maybe perhaps more emotionally. And here's an example, and this is from a speech that I wrote actually very soon after I started in Toastmasters in 2014. And it was a speech about a friend of mine who died from pancreatic cancer. I started the speech in the following way. Imagine climbing into the ring to fight for your own life. Imagine, let me step back. Imagine climbing into the ring to fight Mike Tyson. Imagine if your very life depended upon the outcome of that fight. So the first sentence, I really launch into it. I'm trying to convey climbing into a ring, So maybe you get the visual, but I'm trying to convey fear, the concern I have, the forcefulness of this thing I'm about to embark upon. And then when I say, imagine if your very life depended upon the outcome, I hopefully grab your attention because I'm signaling sincerity. If we ever go back, ladies and gentlemen, to the in-person realm, you also have to think about the size of the room. And one of the things, if we go back to that medium, think about somebody that is the furthest part of the room from you, right at the back wall. Make sure they can hear you. That's a technique I use just to get the volume right. But in the online world, you don't have to think about that too much. That's the volume mechanism. Pitch. Pitch is really about high and low. And this is an area that personally I have struggled with. Right? It's not a natural thing. I too tend to be monotone despite all the efforts I've expended in this regard. But again, we take, you may, at a low pitch, you can begin, and as you raise the pitch, you can convey drama or anxiety again. I started out on this journey, and the further I got into it, the more I realized that I had not anticipated the difficulties I would face. And when it came to the crux of the matter, I realized I was in serious trouble. As one sentence, I show a pitch that rises, peaks, and comes down. And again, pitch can be used to create that excitement, to convey enthusiasm, and then perhaps to convey a different emotion on the downward trend. What about rate? Rate is all about the speed at which we speak. And there are 3 rates: fast, slow, and 0, which is a pause. By the way, I should have given you an example of pitch that was maybe more personal. Let me go back to the pitch story, because there is a favorite story I like to tell about my son back when he was a teenager. He's mid-30s now, but as a teenager, he would be driving home from soccer practice, and he would drive past this speed trap that the police had set up. And I would warn him about that, and he would come in some days and he'd say, "Dad, I got a speeding ticket." And I would say, "What in God's name were you thinking? I've warned you about that so many times." Great example of pitch. And my son would look at me and say, "Dad, it is what it is." Lower pitch. Now, in terms of rate, speaking fast is a challenge that we have to be careful about. We have to be careful that as we speak quickly, we still enunciate carefully. Because if I spoke to you in my Irish accent, I guarantee not one single individual on this call would understand what I'm saying. So watch that in a multicultural environment when we're not all speaking our native language. So speak fast. I like it to convey energy. And I speak slowly, again, for effect, for emphasis, to get a message across. And pausing, as you all know, I'm sure, is probably one of the most effective techniques, because when we pause, we are signaling to the audience that I have just said something that I think is important and I'd like you to listen to. So pausing is a great technique. Here's an example of all of those, I hope, in one single sentence. One of the challenges posed by social media today is that we struggle to understand what is true and what is false. We, the audience, have an issue with understanding whether what we read is true or false. How do we deal with that? The use of rate conveys a lot there. The seriousness of the topic. I'm concerned about the use of social media as a misleading medium, and I'm trying to convey it's very impactful. It's important to me that I understand what I read is true. So rate offers that opportunity. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about tone. Now, there are so many tones that we can use. And again, depending on what part of the world we're from, this can be sometimes difficult to master. If you're in a business meeting, perhaps you'll adopt a formal tone. Or if you're talking about a serious topic, you'll want to talk about it somewhat formally. Here's an example. We're all aware that Black Lives Matter is a serious social movement here today in the US. People are very concerned about how the justice system and how society in general treats Black people. A somewhat formal tone. I could, for instance, be much more cheerful when I'm talking about, and when I share with you that my second grandson was born 3 months ago, and it is an amazing event in our lives, and it brings so much joy to us. And I'm trying to convey the joy, the happiness, the cheerfulness. Now, those are the 4 elements that I wanted to chat to you about today. But the reality is you don't use them exclusively. You put them together. And in many cases, the power is how you put them together. And even in the demonstrations that I've done, you could probably identify volume, some pitch, some rate, and some tone. And that's the reality. That's the reality. What I have found particularly effective in the area of balancing these techniques is the notion of practice. So practice that story. Let me go back on, if I said to you, well, one of the challenges that we face today in the US is that social media is confusing. We don't know what to believe. We don't know what is true. We don't know what is false. That's a very monochromatic way of expressing myself. What I can do is I can use the volume. One of the many challenges faced by social media today is the notion of truth. I think we as human beings struggle to understand what we read. Is it true? Is it false? Who do we believe? The more of the elements, the rate, the pitch, the volume, the pausing you put in there, of course, the better it sounds. Practice that, and you'll find that you'll zero in on a delivery technique that you'll think is more effective for you. In the early days of my journey with vocal variety, I would spend maybe 20 to 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, writing a speech, writing the content. There were times I spent 2 hours rehearsing the vocal variety for the emphasis, knowing that 60% at least of the effectiveness of the message getting across to my audience was around these techniques. And I began to zero in on things that worked for me. And before you know it, it'll only take a couple of years, people. Seriously, it's all about how much you work at it. It becomes more natural because you find your own cadence. And I want to encourage you to think about it that way. It takes a little bit of work. Now, what I'd like us to do is move to the next section of the agenda, which is to review this speech from Ramona Smith. It's a 6 to 7 minute speech. It won the World Championship in 2018. And this person is an extraordinary speaker. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to it, and every time I listen to the speech, I learn something new. Now, Abhijit and I modeled this yesterday, and the sound, when we play it over Zoom, it can be a little bit spotty, both in terms of video and perhaps of audio, and that would be a great loss. You have the link in the chat room. I suggest you take a moment to take that out into your browser. I am going to run the video on this platform, I hope, but suggest that if it doesn't work for you, go to your own medium and try that. So if you want to take a moment, get that link out of the chat room and be ready to run it, because I want to run it for it'll run for 7 minutes or whatever. And afterwards, I want to resume the workshop. So hopefully you'll have listened to your version of it by then. And hopefully that makes sense. Great, Abhijit, thanks for that confirmation. Now I'm going to start the video now, but again, if it's spotty, run it yourself and just put me on mute. I've got a wife, 2 daughters and a son, and they put me on mute all the time. I'm used to it, no problem whatsoever.
Ramona J. Smith, still standing, Ramona J. Smith.
Life will sometimes feel like a fight. The punches, jabs, hooks will come in the form of challenges, obstacles, and failures. Yet if you stay in the ring and learn from those past fights, at the end of each round, you'll be still standing. Mr. Contest Chair, fellow fighters, can you think of a time when life tried to knock you down? Who was your toughest opponent? Most often, our most challenging opponent is ourselves. Round 1, college. I dropped out of college.
Unmute yourself, Declan.
Never
Yeah.
go back. Round 2, marriage. I married my soulmate, the love of my life, my best friend. He was fine too. We were married for 8 beautiful, amazing months. You heard right, months, not years. It was like immediately after we said I do, a heavyweight champion came in and delivered an electrifying knockout blow to our vows. Boom! Round 3, speaking. In 2015, I competed for the first time in the international speech contest. I won at the club level, I won at the area level, I won at the division level. Then the district level was on the way. I was on the road, I was on fire, I was unstoppable. I lost. I was crushed. After going 3 rounds and taking hit after hit, I was ready to throw in the towel. I was down for the count. 6, 7, 8. When was the last time life knocked you down? Who was that lifeline that you reached out to help you did you hold on to your faith? Maybe you've never been knocked down, but you've seen one of your family members take a devastating blow. Were you the lifeline that they were reaching out to help them stand back up? Were you the coach in the corner saying, get up, stand up? As I gathered all the strength within myself to pick myself back up, stand. Instead of looking into a mirror of defeat, it became a window of possibilities. I got back in the ring. I went back to college. I got my degree and I graduated magna cum laude. After failing 4 times, I was still standing. After my loss at the district level, I'm speaking to you from the World Championship stage. It's a moment. Thank you. Even after suffering loss, I'm still standing. As for my marriage, I'm still in training. I have not yet found Mr. Right, but this is an international convention. And there are thousands of men from hundreds of different countries. So single Toastmasters, even after my divorce, I'm still standing. My challenge to you is to stay in the ring, whether you're a fighter or a coach. If you're on the side of the ring coaching, or if you're in that ring throwing those jabs and those hooks, when that final bell rings, ding, 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 the fighters and the coaches will raise their hands in victory singing, I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're still standing. Very nice. Stay in that ring. And even after you take a few hits, use what you learned from those previous fights, and at the end of each round, will remain still standing.
Amazing. What an amazing speaker. What an amazing performer. What an amazing singer. What amazing vocal variety. Hope you enjoyed that. Now, would like to, I'm going to go on gallery view so I can see as many of you as possible. So if you can switch on your videos, because I'd like to engage with you. Please keep yourselves on mute for now. Now, would anybody like to start the discussion by saying, I'm going to talk about her use of volume, and if you had chance to study this beforehand, you might have picked up some good ideas, but anybody willing to start the discussion, where did you see her use volume effectively? And tell me why it worked for you. Take yourself off mute if you want to speak. No takers?
Alison, you want to go first?
Am I being voluntold here?
Ah, Alison, you love to volunteer. It doesn't matter who does it, you love to volunteer.
I thought she used volume very effectively to showcase a difference between discouragement and triumph, especially towards the end of her speech, when she recounted, summarized all of her bouts in the ring where she had lost. And then she spoke at a higher volume about still being standing. And I thought she used volume very well to develop contrast.
That's a great, that's a great way to describe it. It's a contrast. And in that contrast, she conveyed so much. One of the areas, Alison, that I liked that has that notion is, I noted it around 1 minute and 45 seconds. Marriage, I married my soulmate. Then she lowered it. The love of my life, my best friend. So that contrast really worked, as you said. Anybody else see other uses of volume that struck you as effective?
It's kind of a small point in the speech where she does like a sound effect, like bing, bing, bing. It's like, it gets really loud. So that's an easy place to have big contrast without it seeming weird or anything.
A place where I saw that actually, Paul, was around the 2 minute mark. She said, it was like immediately after we said adieu, the heavyweight champion delivered a knockout blow. So volume, and then she raised it, a knockout blow to our vows. Boom. Divorce. I mean, conveyed so much. Love that. Yeah, that's a good example. Anybody else? We'll take one more.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. So I think she used it very well, and it was a very blatant show of emphasis when she was talking about bringing up a family member who had fallen, and she exclaimed, get up, get up. You know, it was a very, very clear emphasis on the enthusiasm she wanted to use to help her family member.
Great. Good example. Let's move along to rate, the notion of the speed at which she spoke. Anybody pick up any elements of her speech where she really changed that rate and it worked for her?
Go ahead, Sue. Go ahead, Sue.
I noticed sometimes she would slow down and she said like knock you down. So like say the words kind of slowly one at a time as an effective vocal variety method.
Great minds think alike, Sue. I noted, she said, can you think of a time when life tried to knock you down? And that's exactly the point. Anybody else pick up anything, any other examples of good use of rate?
Hi.
May I?
Of course, please do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, when she was in the ring giving those punches, her speaking was quite fast and she was going fast, and that was kind of like deliberate and very effective.
Yeah, and so the words she was using were in the ring and probably been beaten a little around by life, and she used the vocal variety technique to convey the chaotic nature of that or whatever. It's a great example. One of the ones that I love because it combined rate with humor. When she said at 2 minutes, she said, we were married for 8 long, beautiful, amazing months. I mean, that was super powerful and really conveyed a lot to me, humor, but you felt her disappointment around a failing marriage, and she got that across. Okay, let's talk about the one that's challenging for me, so I want to be educated by all of you. Pitch. This notion of raising your voice. Where did you see that? How did that work for you?
I can take this. I think when she was in the ring, she mentioned round 1, round 2, round 3. So she mimicked the environment of a ring, and it was high pitch, high for excitement. I think she demonstrated that pretty well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else have any insights?
I actually have a question. What's the difference between volume and pitch?
Volume means speaking loudly or softly. Pitch means speaking at a higher octave or a higher level. So pitch means you raise your tone and you convey a higher level of energy. It's moving up the musical scale, if that helps you. And this woman is clearly a singer. She has amazing pitch. So volume and pitch are quite different. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Can I tell you my favorite pitch part of this story? I mean, she's just so much fun. At about 2 minutes and 50 seconds, I noted, I won at the club level, I won at the area level, I won at the division level, and then it got to the district and it was going to be a great contest and I lost. I mean, I can listen to that all day. I mean, built that crescendo of anticipation, of energy and joy, and then at the district level, I lost. And then she followed that directly with a rate mechanism. She said, I was crushed. That really worked for me, actually, around the pitch and rate. Anybody else got any ideas?
So when she started the song, I'm Still Standing, only because I love Elton John, I was put right into, I felt so much emotion at that point because I know the story, right? Elton John,
right.
For a while, then he was still standing after all the trials and tribulations that he went to. But the raise in voice, I even started singing on this side. So he got me into it because of raising her voice. That was like on the money.
That's great. That's great, Edison. It's that really works. And I want to point out actually about that particular point. Can you think of the courage it takes for a speaker to burst into song at a world championship speech? I mean, she has so much confidence in and belief in herself. She just engages on all of the techniques at her disposal. I think that was amazing. And even the way, by the way, she walked out from behind the curtain, the first thing she did, she just laughed at the audience. Who does that in a speech contest? Again, that vocal variety conveyed to us she was about to have fun. That's what it told me. She was about to have some fun, and I relaxed watching her. Anything else? Anybody, any other points about pitch?
One thing I wanted to mention, at the beginning of the speech, even when she didn't say any word yet, she was chuckling when she entered on the stage. That was very unique, I would say, because I've never heard that in a speech, like chuckling for about 20-30 seconds at different pitches. Like she was amused to see that crowd. That was interesting. It's a different approach.
Oh, it's a different approach, and it's really interesting she did that. Now, the other thing she did in the same vein, somewhere, I didn't note it, but when she was running across the stage, she actually grunted. she made a very guttural song, conveying as she ran across the stage. If you listen to it again, I say, who does that in an international speech? It was the absolute right thing to do. It conveyed the effort of whatever the element of the speech was. So 2 courageous examples of different techniques that don't normally come to mind. Okay, let's move ahead to the notion of the tone, where, you know, and I'll just remind you where formal, informal, joyful, sad. So where did we see that? Does anybody think about where you saw tone that conveyed something strongly to you?
Yeah, I think it was cool how she conveyed being informal with the, you know, with the stance of standing like a fighter, and then she would kind of transition to a more formal presentation like mode when she, you know, put her hands down. But I thought, you know, putting her hands up like that was a nice tool to be not informal in a way that was inappropriate, but that really conveyed the message that she was trying to do.
Good point, Hudson. Good point. Anybody else? Alison.
Yeah, hello. Oh. May I, or someone else is taking?
Go ahead, Viba.
Viba, yeah. Viba. Thank you. When she mentioned about my long, I got married to my soulmate, and my long marriage, there was sarcasm, there was a little bit of sadness, and a little bit of comic also.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a great example of the integration of a few things. Alison, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I would like to say that she was somewhat of a magician in how she used tone. I always mentor folks to try to be as casual and conversational and less formal in order to connect with the audience. That imagine you're speaking to your best friend instead of a room full of people. Mm. And she held on to that quality despite having a presentation or a style that was very dramatic, but it didn't look performed. So somehow she was able to combine performance with audience connection and casualness in a way that kept us really connected with her.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, in some ways that came together with those couple of gestures, more gestures for me, Alison, where she said, you know, the notion is that, hey, there's all these people, international people here, and then she says, call me, you know, that type of thing, just very, almost like super casual and engaging, and we all identify with that, of course. Maybe I'll offer an area that I thought was really effective around tone. She said, I was ready to throw in the towel. I was down for the count. And then she counted 6, 7, 8. And to me, her tone just conveyed despair. Despair. Her life was a mess. She was failing. And that tone, and again, it stirred in me a sense of empathy for her, just by her tone alone. Anybody else have any other areas where you saw some great or some...
Sue, you had something?
I was just going to say, watching her, to me, she seems like an actress. And it's hard to put it in a box, like to pick out, you know, what is sad or, you know, there's so much going on. I don't know how you even classify it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually, Sue, I really do recognize the challenge, and that's what I was trying to signal at the outset. Breaking it into these elements is a little bit unnatural. I get that. I mean, I literally get that. Because and somebody like Ramona Smith integrates everything seamlessly. And she is, of course, a performer. No question about that. Yeah. Anybody else have anything on tone that you thought might be worth sharing with the group?
At the end, when she said that at the end of each round, you are still standing, she emphasized on this sentence as saying that no matter which circumstances you are, you will get out of it. Believe in yourself. Yeah. That is the word she emphasized on, and I really like that thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So hopefully that discussion helps you understand the techniques, because those of you that have contributed, I appreciate it, because you're sharing what you saw, and therefore you help us see what you saw in her delivery. And those of you who did not speak, yeah, I hope you've had some value out of that. And if you want to, if you have the time, I suggest take another 6 or 7 minutes today, tomorrow, look at that. You'll get something new out of it every time. Now, I want to come to the next part of our discussion, which is which is where I think a number of you are maybe thinking about, and that is the integration of all of these things. How do you do that? So I am going to ask those of you that have tried to address this, how have you thought about putting elements of vocal variety together? Is there something you've discovered actually in your own speaking career, in the real world, professional world, or in Toastmasters that helps? We've got some experienced people on the call. Anybody want to talk about how you have integrated vocal variety effectively into your speaking patterns?
I would like to share my experience. I think volume, pitch, rate, and tone. If we, let's say in one speech, if we focus on just volume, one at a time, and then next speech, maybe pitch, maybe another one, rate, and then tone. If you work individually on each component of overall vocal variety, and then naturally you actually combine all of them together. That helped me actually, that I want to share with you all. Thank you.
That's great. Mohammed, you've essentially validated my own approach, where I think I took something similar. I wanted to understand the elements, and then I practice the elements. I get comfortable with the elements, and then I put them together. So that's what I've done too. Anybody else have any insights? Maybe how we should think about this? Is there a different way of thinking about vocal variety and integrating?
Hi, this is Suman here. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I love that background.
Oh, okay. Thank you. It's not a background. It's actually real.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah. Well, I haven't really given any speeches in Toastmasters. I'm attending this event as a guest, but I believe that staying in touch with your feelings and emotions is what really helps you express those that vocal variety in whatever you say. I'm a teacher, and I many times see myself when I'm telling a story always getting into those emotions, which is sometimes a bad thing for me, but that brings vocal variety to my speech.
Yeah. Again, I think we would all identify with that, Suman. And I'm going to link that to what Alison said, which is this notion of a natural conversation. If a speech becomes a conversation, you're probably a little bit more comfortable disclosing or being more authentic, and maybe disclosing that emotional side. You know, it's interesting for me. I struggled with incorporating emotion into storytelling and into Toastmasters at the beginning of my time, because I was afraid that I would appear weak, or I would be I was concerned about the vulnerability associated with disclosing emotions. And then I started to tell stories. I'm a cancer survivor, and that friend of mine, we went through cancer together. He died, I survived. And I began to tell stories that had an emotional quotient. And I surprised myself by being okay with telling emotional stories, and it helped me get more comfortable in the emotional space. And that's a gift that Toastmasters has given me. So I'd encourage people, when stories are real, when stories are personal, when stories are of deep meaning to you, it lends itself to vocal variety, but it also lends itself to connecting with the audiences, which is what Alison, I think, was highlighting to us. So great point. Great point. Anything else around integration, putting it all together? What works, what doesn't?
I usually stop when I'm stressed out. I make a pause at that particular time, and I speak loudly when I feel that I'm very much confident enough. That is what I usually do. Sometimes when we do a public speaking, I get nervous, so I just pause at that particular time and then continue from there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, again, I would say that you know, when we, particularly in the early part of our speaking careers, are nervous, and of course it's totally understandable, and frankly, some level of nervousness is important at any stage, because it keeps, I think it keeps you a little bit sharp and doesn't allow you to be complacent. But I think that the notion of pausing is so powerful. I pause in speeches a lot. Now, sometimes, you know, the audience say, that pause was super effective, Declan, that really worked. Now, the reality was I was pausing because I was thinking, where am I going to go next with this impromptu speech? So the notion is you should pause, and sometimes don't worry about what the audience sees. They'll see what they see. And pausing is not a bad thing at any stage. And you may need to do that to compose yourself, to move on, to marshal your thoughts. That's absolutely fine. Pausing is a wonderful technique, actually, in so many ways, for emphasis and for composure, and maybe dealing with anxiety, actually. Keep pausing, take a deep breath, and move on. Great idea. Thanks for, I remember those days.
I would like to give my 2 cents. I'm a relatively new Toastmaster, not too much experience, but when I gave my first icebreaker speech, I was scared that I will forget what I had written down, so I was going at a faster pace.
Yeah.
I was speaking really fast, and that's the feedback I got. And the second speech I gave, I transferred all my nervousness into pacing, like physically pacing.
Yeah.
Instead of my actual speech pace. My speech pace was perfect. Instead, the nervousness transferred into walking briskly.
Yeah.
So over time, I started practicing my speeches quite a bit before I gave them. So it settled down a little bit. But one thing I started doing was that whatever I read, any article or a book, I started doing that in my mind, like saying as if I would give it in a speech, like dramatically. If the article says, a person said, oh, I have no idea about this. So I'm just thinking, okay, how would I say it if I were giving this speech, if I were to say it in a speech? So just having that conscious mind when you're reading something and thinking in the background, how can I emote this, or how can I present this in a way that attracts the audience? It's been helpful.
Yeah. Great story. When you give a seminar or a workshop on this, please invite me. I'd love to hear.
If I do, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. In my speaking style, I actually like to move. I'm having a hard time moving to this online medium. I mean, you can see I'm moving. I used to be an athlete, and I just have to move. And I'm trying to learn how to move appropriately in the online medium. It helped me so much in the in-person medium, and it's one of my growth objectives in these strange times we live in.
Hi, Declan. I have something to share too.
Oh my goodness, not Renee. Oh my goodness, Renee. Long time no see.
Declan was my first mentor when I was at the Cupertino Morning Master. And it's been 4 years since I joined NVIDIA, so I now is part of the corporate NVIDIA Toastmaster. But thank you, Declan, for giving the talk. I'm still here. I still give speeches. It's been 6 years now. So I think from the vocal variety perspective, one thing that sometimes I leverage is when there's something I want to emphasize. If there's something I want to emphasize, then I soften it or slow it down prior to that to make a huge contrast. And I think sometimes that could add to certain effects that you want to do in your speeches.
That's absolutely right, Renee. That's, yeah, that's that you know, that transition, as you transition to that lower, slower rate, it conveys, it stimulates the audience to say, oh, there's something coming. They listen a little bit more closely and they engage with you. So,
and
yeah,
I think for that video that you shared, believe it or not, I watched that video so many times. Every time before a speech, before a real competition or even actual real presentation, I go back to that speech to remind myself that, hey, this is how much more you can do. Because especially in front of a video, a lot of that kind of get lost, especially when you're not in front of a person. I do sometimes find myself having a hard time reconciling what's considered as fake, what's considered as real emotion, and which was, I think, one of the audience member here asked about that seemed like someone who's acting. So I especially that now I've been giving a lot more corporate related presentations, I do try to make sure even if I'm using vocal variety or anything else, it's not for dramatic effect. It actually really come from what you want to emphasize, then it will seem less fake. I have experienced that over the years. I was like, do I do this? Do I do that? If I were to raise my hand, does it look fake? Or if I were to raise my voice here or speed up or slow down or increase my pitch in a way, is that too much? I constantly ask myself that question. So I just thought to share with you, you're not the only one that's thinking about it. The last 6-7 years giving speeches, I've definitely experienced a fair shared amount of that concern within as well.
Renee, that's a perfect segue into one of the last points that I wanted to just have a brief discussion on here, is this notion of vocal variety, let's say, in this case, within the Toastmaster world and then within the professional world. People say to me exactly the dilemma that you have described. How do you do this? I mean, look at Ramona Smith. She's truly a performer. She's singing. She's moving around the stage. How can I possibly use that in NVIDIA when you're talking to a customer, for example? Right? So here's the thought I have for you all, and I haven't put a lot of time on the agenda for it, but I wanted to address it. I suggest we do the following. Okay, in the Toastmasters world, it's a safe experimental learning laboratory or learning environment, and I say to each one of you and to myself, push the limit. Push the limit of vocal variety until you're beginning to be uncomfortable with it. You're sounding like a banshee, that's an Irish word, screeching, that you're too dramatic, you're too this, you're too that. And but in Toastmasters, what you can do actually is get very comfortable with that. And if I was to say, the metaphor I want to use here is, then when you get comfortable with these techniques more so than you have been prior to, then in the business environment, I just make the rectangle of the comfort zone smaller. You have to do exactly what Renee described. You have to be conscious of what's an acceptable practice in the professional environment. But I suggest to you that if you practice the techniques and get comfortable with your own skill level, you will know where those limits are in the professional world, and you will exercise that probably very effectively. Absolutely better than you would if you hadn't gone through your learning curve in Toastmasters. That for me is the insight around business. I mentioned vocal variety as one of the key things that changed in my world in communication, and that's sort of more a generic point. Less around vocal variety, but what I have taken out of Toastmasters into the business world, and I'm a technologist and I'm in startups and I talk to investors and VCs and customers and technology partners, I have used the storytelling technique that I've learned and exercised in Toastmasters in the professional world, and it's been enormously successful. Less time on PowerPoint, more times telling stories about the people that come with us and what we're trying to do and the issues we've had and the struggles and the this and that. So I would generally say, thanks for that segue to this part of the practice in Toastmasters. Go absolutely beyond your comfort zone and then dial it back in the business world. That's my thought. Now I'd like to see, does anybody identify with that? Or does anybody say, oh, that hasn't worked for me, or here's what I've done in the business world with Toastmasters techniques? Love to hear it.
I want to add something, may not be directly to what you are saying, but on the same lines of how we can use vocal variety in the speeches. I heard this from Eric Edmundus, who is a public speaker, and what he was trying to mention is, if we see from the perspective of the audience, there are three kind of audiences. The first audience is like, they are very soft spoken people and they want people to talk to them very softly. And then there are people like us who just talk on the auditory mode, which is, so first kind of people are kinesthetic people. The second ones are auditory, just like what we are talking. And there are third kind of people who are like highly visual people who wants to be heard as inspirational or things like that. So if you start on a high note, people, or let's say a loud or high note, when you're trying to influence or inspire them, the people who are like soft spoken or kinesthetic, they will feel like, you're shouting. And even auditory people will kind of feel like that. So it is said that you start with the kinesthetic, the soft level. So they feel that, okay, you are on a journey with them. And then you go to the second level, which is auditory level, like what we are talking right now. And then in your speech, you can have something very inspirational or loud. So you take everyone along with the journey, and the soft and auditory people don't feel left out. And it should be like a sine wave. It should like continue to that loop, like go to kinesthetic, go to the auditory level, then tell something very inspirational, then again come on the soft note. So that was something which I tried in my speeches as well. I tried to implement that, which worked.
That's a very good idea. And to me, that speaks to knowing the audience and knowing what their comfort level is. And particularly in the business world, that's key. And I can tell you for sure, when I talk to investors that I don't know, I don't start out with a lot of volume. I can tell you that. Anybody else have any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I would like to share my personal observation. You talked about translating the Toastmaster experience into the business world. What I observed, and I thought initially the Toastmaster, like we exaggerate a lot, like, hey, use body language, use vocal variety. Then I thought, maybe it's way too much, right? But when I watched a lot of videos of our CEO and other business leaders, I can tell you my observation, they use vocal variety and body language a lot. That's my observation, a lot.
Exactly. And I want to remind you that at the end of the day, whether we're communicating within Toastmasters or within the business world, we're talking to human beings. We're all pretty much the same, even though Renee and I don't look anywhere more alike. But at the end of the day, we're people with emotional and an intellectual profile, and we like to be treated with respect, and we like to be heard, and we like to be listened to, and we like to be communicated in an authentic way. So there's so much here that is relevant in the business world, and I would encourage you to try some of what you do here in Toastmasters there. It will work. You just have to watch those boundaries. Do not go off the scale. you know, and try something and try just, yeah,
I actually
I love it.
very much agree with you. I didn't realize that I was doing that until you do always a really good job summarizing what we do in a very succinct manner. I was asked to present in front of a 500 group of audience, and I was really nervous to start off. And I just remember the practice that I have at Toastmaster. I was like, I do this every Thursday. It's going to be okay. I'm just going to follow my heart, and I already memorized my script. It's going to be all good. And the vocal variety actually came out naturally because of the weekly practice that we do. And on that, immediately after I came down stage, I didn't remember what I was talking about on stage. That's how nervous I was. And then the similar thing happened. I didn't know I was that natural and good and had a ton of emotion on stage until the similar event. A different speaker from NVIDIA went on stage, and I was given the feedback to say, oh my God, why are two people delivering the same content, but yours just seemed to have more emotions? It was a very simple story that I was trying to tell about how a customer was super excited to use our product. That's how dry as it could get, right? But then I was being super excited about how our customers were excited about our product. And immediately my vocal variety just added like that excitement to it. And whereas the next presenter was actually a solution architect who was very technically savvy, but the way that he delivered a presentation in front of a stage of 500 people, it felt a little different. So I was given that feedback and I was like, okay, that's Toastmaster. Years of practice that really showed up on stage that I didn't even remember what I talked about. So I think little things do add up, and testing the boundary during Toastmasters definitely help for sure. So thank you, Declan, for summarizing that. Now that gives me an even more comprehensive, I think, perspective. I've been doing that. I just didn't even know I was doing it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you know, part of the reason I put this topic on the agenda, and it was because I think people are interested, but I'm interested in it, and I'm in the habit of saying that I have never ever gone to a Toastmasters meeting with the objective of making a better speech at Toastmasters. My objective in going to Toastmasters is to try something, to learn something new, to get comfortable with something that I think I need to be comfortable with, and then take it back into this, what I call the real world. That's my whole mission around this. That's why I'm in Toastmasters. So I wanted to bring this to you so that you think not just about Toastmasters and learning within this realm, but think, as Renee has very articulately described, the power of it in the real world. And Renee, I'm sure you took risks, but you felt comfortable taking those risks. And in that, probably the human being came out much more naturally than the somewhat dry, arid architect, perhaps. But anyway, so great. This is, I really wanted to spend a few minutes on it. It's not the primary purpose of that, but I wanted to leave you with that thought or whatever. In the few minutes we've left, are there any final Q&A questions that maybe you're not clear on, something we haven't covered?
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Shantanu. Oh, that's a strange name, Shantanu. How are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I've been good, yes. So this, and thanks for the session. This came at a very good time. I'm actually at a vocal variety level in my pathways. So that's the course I'm taking right now. There are a few simple exercises and pathways to try out the modulate your pitch and tone. But for someone like me who's very monotonous and doesn't really emote through voices, are there any other resources that you could suggest which I could use to practice more?
Yeah, a great question. And frankly, it's because this is such sometimes a difficult subject to really get down to what can I do differently. That's why I chose Ramona's speech. And I really would suggest, Shantanu, what might work is listen to that speech, listen to a sentence, watch what she does, try it yourself. That's why I say I spend 30 minutes writing a speech and 2 hours practicing it, because it's all in the intonation, it's all in the inflection, and keep doing that and see what you're comfortable with, Shantanu. I mean, it's actually a lot of work. For somebody who came into Toastmasters and somebody said that you've elevated your monotone as an art form, Declan, you should patent it. I had to work at it really hard, Shantanu. So do the work, use that. There's so much in her speech that can teach us so much. Practice it. It'll come across as odd, and you'll zero in, and you asymptotically you'll approach something that you are comfortable with, and before you know it, you're operating in a much broader comfort zone.
I would like to share something.
Yes.
We all have different personalities, right? Some of us are very calm, some of us are bubbly, and some of us are excited, super excited with things, get dramatic. Some are dramatic. So it also, I think, has to blend well with our personality. Ramona Smith is kind of very outstanding in many areas. So I guess we have to kind of identify our own skills, where we can do better, or which area we can actually emphasize more, things like that. I think it has to blend with our personality too.
Now, this is another topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to share something, and I might have shared this with Renee years ago. I am, on a measured scale of extrovert to introvert, at the bleeding edge of being an introvert. Okay. Years ago there were Myers-Briggs tests, and I've done it several times. It was a part of the requirement when I came to the US, and people looked at this profile, this profile, and they said, how can somebody who is hardcore introvert, how can he ever manage people? How can he communicate? And today my energy comes from within. But I want to encourage you that there are things called learned behaviors. You can teach yourself skills. I tell people I'm an introvert, and people laugh. They say, no, Declan, you're the life and soul of the party. You're just, whatever they say. I don't listen to them anyway, because I know I'm an introvert. But my point is, seriously, these are skills. Don't be trapped by some definition you may have of yourself. No, I can't do that because. So I'm not arguing with you, Vaiba, but I want to say, don't accept in your own mind a limited definition of who you are. You can learn, you can change. So anyway, just one of my thoughts.
Yeah, but to kind of piggyback off what Vaiba said, you do want to stick to your strengths, though, wouldn't you say, and not steer away from your weaknesses.
Stick to the strengths. I mean, in Toastmasters, I say that there are two sources of improvement, Hudson. One is your strengths. Take what you do well and leverage it further, and then identify the weaknesses. So I'm not saying. So, for instance, I would say to you that introversion is hugely beneficial to me in public speaking. But I've learned the delivery and the engaging stuff. So it's not either or. You develop a broader set of tools that allows you to engage at multiple levels with multiple people. So leverage your strengths, work on whatever those definitions of your weaknesses are. They're just opportunities to change and learn more. Now, we're at 1:02. I would love to keep this conversation going because I love this stuff and you're a great audience and I really appreciate it. But I think I do have to bring it to a close. And I think most of the audience has received a feedback form. I've done this vocal variety workshop in the in-person realm, and this was the first. We were just guinea pigging. You have been a test audience today. How does this work online? If you have any thoughts for how we could do this differently, what worked, give me an idea of what worked, what didn't. I would appreciate it. The form that Abhijit has provided to many of you, and if you need it, he'll provide it again, allows for the positive and negative. Tell me what didn't work so I can work on it. Tell me what did work so I make sure I never lose it or I can even develop it further. With that, I want to say thank you very much for all of your time and effort here and your attention today. Thank you.